Before we begin this story, I want to ask you something. If you're someone who enjoys tales of forgotten human power, deep space battles, and turning the tide against impossible odds, then take a second to subscribe. Here on this channel, we share the very best HFY stories, where humanity isn't just remembered, it's feared. So go ahead, hit subscribe. Let's keep the fire burning. Now, let's begin. They burned their way across the stars. System after system, gone. Entire species wiped from existence without mercy. No one could stop them. Not the old empires, not the trading blocks, not even the automated defense swarms. The galaxy was being undone, one world at a time. But then something happened. Just as the enemy fleet approached the final line of resistance, their long-range scanners picked up something new. A single vessel, silent, cold, unknown. One designation blinked onto their screen. One they didn't understand. But every ancient AI, every old soldier who still remembered the truth, did a Terran warship. It began quietly, as these things always do. A single colony went dark in the outer spiral arms. Nothing unusual. Trade disruptions, signal failure, pirate interference. That's what they thought at first. But then, a second colony vanished. Then 5 more. No messages, no debris, no survivors. Just silence. At first, the Galactic Assembly believed it was a contained threat. Isolated, manageable. The usual protocols kicked in. Scan the area, send patrols, issue alerts. The patrols didn't come back. The Assembly sent larger ships, battlecruisers with armed escorts. They vanished too. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. Survivors from one of the few colonies that managed to broadcast an emergency signal told a harrowing tale. Massive black ships, moving without heat, without sound. Strange. Technology that blinked in and out of physical space. Weapons that didn't explode but unraveled matter, ripping through shields and hulls as if they weren't even there. These weren't pirates. They weren't raiders or some fringe uprising. This was something else entirely. They were called many names in those early days. The Dreaded, the Shroud, the Architects. But the name that stuck was simple. The Ravagers. No one knew where they came from. They didn't communicate. They didn't demand anything. They just arrived and consumed. One world was encased in a strange metallic shell, its atmosphere siphoned off in minutes. Another was turned inside out, entire tectonic plates torn, up and folded skyward like paper. On one moon, the entire population was erased, leaving their buildings untouched, dinner still warm on plates. There were no signs of heat damage, no impact craters, just removal, clean and quiet. All efforts to resist were met with immediate and overwhelming force. Standard energy weapons were absorbed. Ballistic arms were redirected or dismantled mid-flight. Even dark matter torpedoes fizzled out before detonation. And the worst part? They moved fast. The Ravagers didn't just destroy, they advanced. In a matter of weeks, they tore through 5 sectors of populated space. Within months, they had reached the edges of core civilization. Fleets that had stood unchallenged for centuries were obliterated in seconds. Entire species, some with legacies stretching back thousands of years, were erased before they even understood the scale of the threat. Panic spread. The Assembly tried to organize a unified defense, but fear had already splintered their alliance. Planets closed their borders. Armadas went into hiding. Some systems shut off their jump gates completely, hoping to avoid detection by going dark. It didn't work. The Ravagers were methodical. They left no witnesses, no evidence, just silence, in every system they touched. And as the last bastions of resistance scrambled to protect what little remained, the truth became clear. There was no stopping them. Every weapon had failed. Every strategy collapsed. Every plea for peace was met with the same cold silence. In desperation, the Assembly issued a final, open distress call, not to any government, not to any known species, but to the void itself. They broadcast a single message. To anyone listening, to anyone still out there, Help us. Most believed no one would answer, but somewhere, far beyond the reach of current charts, something ancient stirred, and deep inside a forgotten solar system, long written off as dead, a silent warship powered on for the first time in centuries. With every passing day, the Ravagers pushed deeper into known space. The Galactic Assembly, once a symbol of interstellar unity and diplomacy, now operated more like a war council. Gone were the grand speeches and idealistic debates. Now it was survival, pure and simple. Core worlds that had never seen combat scrambled to erect defenses. Mining colonies were converted into military outposts. Civilian freighters were welded with makeshift weapons and assigned to escort duty. But it was too little too late. The Ravagers weren't slowing down. They didn't follow known jump paths. They emerged from gravity wells where no one thought ships could survive. They moved with terrifying unpredictability, sometimes skipping entire sectors, only to strike 3 systems over, killing millions in an hour. In a final act of unity, the remaining assembly members gathered at Arden's Ring, one of the last fully fortified starbases left standing. Representatives from over 40 species met, some in person, most via projection. They didn't argue this time. There was no point. Every species had suffered losses. Every civilization had been touched by the silence. There was no time left to assign blame. Admiral Trell of the Varnic Order, one of the oldest surviving military powers, spoke first. "Whatever they are," he said, "they don't fear us. They don't understand negotiation. This isn't war, this is extermination." There was a pause and then silence. That's when an ambassador from a nearly extinct species stood and asked a question that should have sounded absurd. What if we reached out to Earth? No one responded at first. The name hung in the air like a forbidden word. Most of the galaxy didn't even know what Earth was anymore. A dead world, a forgotten myth, some ancient homeworld from a species that burned itself out before the assembly was even born. But there were whispers, always whispers, stories of a species that fought like no other, that rose from their own ashes time and time again, that didn't follow rules because they wrote them. Some called them monsters, others called them saviors. But everyone who remembered agreed on one thing: humans weren't extinct. They were waiting. It was a gamble, a desperate one. There hadn't been a verified signal from Earth in centuries. The Sol system was classified as Silent Sector Alpha long ago. No ships in, no signals out. Still, the vote was held. And for the first time since the Ravagers appeared, the Assembly voted unanimously. They would send a long-range probe. No payload, no message of peace, just a simple beacon, encoded with the only word that might still mean something: help. The probe was launched into deep space, slingshot through collapsed gates and abandoned relay stations. Most believed it would drift, forever unheard, unanswered. But 47 hours later, a signal came back, not from Earth directly, but from deep within the Sol system. It was brief, no flourish, no formality, just 5 words. Message received. Stand by. That was it. The Assembly didn't know what to make of it. Was it real? Was it human? Was it just a trick of corrupted code echoing back through dead systems? They didn't have time to answer those questions. Because at that exact moment, a Ravager fleet larger than anything seen before was detected heading toward Arden's Ring. The last line, the final defense, the heart of what remained. The Assembly moved into the evacuation protocol. Military leaders prepared for the end, and civilians across hundreds of worlds braced for the lights to go out. But far beyond the outer rim, something moved. A single vessel, alone, silent, unknown. And on every scanner it passed, one classification error repeated over and over again: unidentified warship, signature, Terran. At first it looked like a sensor glitch. A single ship had appeared on deep-range scanners just outside the Varnac perimeter. No warp trail, no beacon signature, no registry code. It hadn't entered the system. It had emerged, as if it had always been there, just hidden behind a fold in the dark. Standard protocol flagged it as a potential ghost contact. But ghost contacts don't move. This one did. Slowly, purposefully, and straight toward the last known position of the Ravager. Fleet Galactic sensors struggled to analyze it. The ship wasn't massive, at least not compared to modern dreadnoughts, but it was dense. Too dense. Its hull was layered in unknown alloys that bent light strangely, as if wrapped in gravity itself. It radiated no heat, no emissions, not even a traditional power signature. One surveillance drone that approached the vessel was immediately disabled. No explosion, no electronic warfare. It simply shut off. The assembly dispatched another probe, this time broadcasting in over 3,000 languages, hoping for a response. They got one. The ship didn't answer directly. Instead, it redirected the signal, bounced it off a broken relay once thought inoperable, sending it straight to every major capital, every military post, every emergency frequency still functional. 5 words. Calm, clear. Human presence acknowledged. Proceeding to target. Panic turned into confusion. Was this ship really from Earth? Was this the response to their call? No one knew. And those who did remember, the elders, the scholars, the classified keepers of old Terran archives, they said nothing. But their silence spoke volumes. The assembly watched as the ship passed through system after system, uncontested, untouched. Even Ravager scouts began to avoid it. That was the first real clue. Because the Ravagers feared nothing, they didn't flee, they didn't hide, they consumed, until now. One surveillance platform, operated by an independent machine enclave, recorded a remarkable event. 3 Ravager destroyers intercepted the Terran ship over an uninhabited world. They moved fast, forming an offensive triangle formation, flanking the vessel from 3 angles. Standard tactics. Except, they never fired. The moment they finished maneuvering, the Terran ship released a silent pulse. No explosion, no beam. Just a ripple like reality had hiccuped. All 3 destroyers halted in place, and then slowly they dismantled. Not exploded, not shot down. Their hulls came apart bolt by bolt, panel by panel, dissolving into floating dust. It was surgical, intentional, final. And through it all, the Terran ship didn't change course, didn't even slow down. It simply continued. The data spread like wildfire. The networks buzzed with speculation. News feeds resurrected Earth's name with a mix of awe and dread. People asked questions. Where had the humans been all this time? Why, now? And how could a single ship do what thousands of vessels couldn't? Some said it was a prototype, humanity's last creation before vanishing. Others whispered it was autonomous, an AI built to protect, now finally awakened. But deep down, in the quietest moments, the oldest among them knew the truth. This wasn't humanity's last ship. It was their first response. A warning shot. A sign that someone had knocked on a door that should have stayed shut. As the ship drew closer to Ardent's ring, the final defensive line, military forces scrambled, not to fight it, but to clear the way. They moved stations, redirected patrols. Commanders gave silent orders to let the ship pass, because no one wanted to risk interfering with whatever this thing was. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a message. And as it finally entered visual range of the ring's outer defense wall, every feet across the galaxy flickered to life. The ship's hull bore no insignia, no call sign, only one glowing symbol near its prow, faint white, barely illuminated, a circle, 2 crossed lines inside, Earth. The Terran warship came to a halt just outside Ardent's ring, no weapons drawn, no shields activated, no message, just presence. And that presence alone caused every system in the ring to run emergency diagnostics. Not because the ship had done anything, but because every sensor on every frequency was failing to understand what it was seeing. The ship's hull appeared static at first, matte black and angular, as if carved from a single slab of obsidian. But closer analysis revealed movement beneath the surface, slow, purposeful, like a fluid lattice of armor shifting layer by layer. It didn't reflect light, it absorbed it, and it didn't produce sound, heat, or radiation. It was, by every definition of physics the assembly had, impossible. One high-ranking admiral aboard the ring gave a simple order: don't provoke it. The ship remained idle for nearly 30 minutes. During that time, comms operators tried every known protocol. They sent greetings in all known galactic dialects, even long-forgotten ones from extinct civilizations. There was no response, only silence. And then the warship moved. Not quickly, not aggressively. It simply drifted forward, through the outer perimeter, bypassing defense satellites, ignoring targeting systems, slipping past the magnetic mine net like it wasn't even there. It was impossible. Every weapon system that locked onto it failed. Targeting solutions jammed. Lasers refused to calibrate. Torpedo bays stalled mid-load. One weapon's AI even shut itself off, declaring tactical mismatch detected. Ships that got too close lost power momentarily. Not destroyed, just rendered irrelevant. A single drone, attempting to latch onto the hull for inspection, disintegrated. Before contact, no fire, no explosion, just gone. And then the ship passed through the final defense layer, into the path of the Ravager fleet. That was when the real shift happened. Because up until that moment, the Ravagers had always advanced. They never stopped, never paused, never retreated. But now, facing this one Terran ship, they hesitated. Scanners picked up something unprecedented. The Ravagers were repositioning, pulling back, reorganizing, preparing to defend. They had never done that before. Ever. Commanders across the assembly gasped, not because the Terran ship was approaching, but because the enemy was afraid. The warship didn't broadcast anything. It didn't show its weapons. It didn't even acknowledge the Ravagers. It simply turned slowly, as if examining them one by one. Then, the energy spike hit. Not an explosion, not a beam or a missile, just a sudden massive change in the surrounding space. Scanners overloaded. Subspace sensors shorted out. Artificial gravity wobbled for a few moments across every station within 5 light minutes, and then the lead Ravager destroyer folded in on itself, like reality had pulled a string, and the ship collapsed into a pinpoint of light before vanishing. No sound, no shrapnel, just gone. The fleet scattered. Some fired back wildly. Others tried to escape. The Terran ship didn't chase. It didn't even move. It just waited. A second wave of Ravagers launched missiles laced with void plasma. A hit from one of those had vaporized an entire moon weeks ago. The missiles flew straight at the Terran ship and blinked out of existence 5 kilometers from impact. Not exploded, not diverted, erased. The fleet fractured. Dozens of ships turned away and ran, entering blind warp jumps into unknown space, just to escape. And still, the Terran ship did not pursue. It remained in position for several more minutes, scanning the battlefield with eerie calm. And then, for the first time, it broadcasted again. The message came in Terran Standard, translated instantly across every known language by the warship itself. Your error has been corrected. Further violation will not be tolerated. That was it. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a conclusion, a closing statement. And in that moment, the galaxy understood what it was really seeing. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a judgment. The Ravagers had broken something sacred, something the galaxy itself had long forgotten, and Earth had sent one ship to remind them. The Terran ship didn't stay to bask in its impact. It didn't demand surrender or issue ultimatums. It simply turned and began moving again, calm, unstoppable, unchallenged. The assembly, stunned into silence, scrambled to track its trajectory. It, too, wasn't returning to Sol. It was hunting. Over the next several days, the galaxy watched as the ship traveled from system to system, each one recently hit by the Ravagers. each one still flickering with signs of destruction. And at each site, it acted, not with fury, not with bombs or brute force, but with something far more terrifying: precision. One system had been left uninhabitable, its atmosphere ripped away by the Ravagers' weaponized storms. The Terran ship deployed a single payload, a sphere, no larger than a transport pod, drifted into the dead world's orbit and released a pulse. Within hours, oxygen returned, water condensed, vegetation began sprouting from barren rock. No announcement, no credit claimed, just results. In another system, a fleet of Ravager stragglers hid in the rings of a gas giant, hoping to repair and regroup. They were found, but no weapons were fired. Instead, the Terran ship disrupted local gravity fields with a controlled distortion pattern, folding the ring debris into high-velocity impactors. The result was clean, brutal, silent. The enemy ships were torn apart, not by missiles or lasers, but by math. There was no escape, because the Terran ship didn't chase. It predicted. It knew where the enemy would go before they made the decision themselves, and that was the part that terrified everyone the most. Humanity wasn't reacting. They were already ahead. One Ravager frigate attempted to broadcast a surrender signal. It was ignored, not maliciously, not vindictively. It was as if the ship had been deemed irrelevant, and that was the real punishment. The Ravagers weren't just being defeated, they were being dismissed, erased, not as an act of vengeance, but as a correction to a galactic mistake. The Assembly's best tacticians studied the recordings obsessively. They couldn't understand the Terran ship's movements. There was no visible propulsion, no detectable power core. Its weapons didn't exist in any spectrum known to modern science. The only conclusion? This ship operated on principles far beyond conventional physics. Someone, somewhere, had taken humanity's past and evolved it into something beyond comprehension, and the galaxy had no choice but to acknowledge it. No assembly fleet dared follow. No system raised weapons against it. Even the pirate lords of the outer fringe deactivated their networks and slipped into hiding. Because everyone understood now, this wasn't war. It was consequence. And as the Terran ship continued its journey, one by one, the Ravagers vanished. They stopped attacking, stopped transmitting, stopped existing. Some theorized they had fled to another galaxy. Others believed the Terran ship had found and ended their central command, wherever that was. But those were just guesses. The truth was simpler and far more chilling. They had been given a message, and they'd understood it. The galaxy's apex predator had returned, not to conquer, not to rule, but to remind. One admiral from a once proud warrior species said it best in a private briefing. Humanity didn't fight us. They didn't even consider us opponents. They showed up, pointed at the mess, and said, "Clean it up or we will." And the universe listened. After the final engagement, the Terran ship returned to deep space. It didn't visit Sol. It didn't reply to the assembly. It didn't stop. It simply faded into the dark, like a shadow that had stepped briefly into the light, only to vanish once more. But before it left, it sent a single, final message to every system, every relay, every ship: we are awake. Choose wisely. And then, silence. The war was over. Not because a treaty had been signed, not because the enemy had surrendered, but because they had been corrected, methodically, silently, with absolute certainty. And in the stillness that followed, the galaxy began to remember, not through stories but through evidence. Terran technology, long thought extinct or mythical, had left behind traces. Ruins had been reactivated. Dead satellites blinked online again. Old, derelict relay stations sent pings in Earth-standard encryption, locked behind protocols so advanced, even the Assembly's top engineers couldn't crack them. In forgotten corners of the galaxy, archivists unearthed data cores marked with a symbol, a white circle. 2 slashed lines. Files once dismissed as fabrications were reclassified as historical fact. Entire libraries restructured their war sections. Galactic histories were rewritten, and for the first time in generations, humanity was no longer spoken of as myth. They were legacy. Many civilizations realized the same cold truth at the same time. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had withdrawn. They hadn't been defeated. They had simply grown tired of carrying a galaxy that refused to learn. And in their absence, the stars had grown arrogant. The Assembly had declared itself the center of peace and order. The younger species believed war was a problem of the past. The elders, those who had fought beside or against humanity in distant ages, were silenced, retired, or forgotten. Now their warnings echoed louder than ever. The old warriors had tried to tell them, Earth doesn't sleep. It waits. The arrogance of forgetting Earth hadn't been just a failure of history. It had been a failure of humility. Because to forget Earth wasn't just to forget a planet. It was to forget what made the galaxy safe in the first place. It was humans who had dismantled the great war fleets of the Hellar Dominion. Humans who had held the shattered wall against the void leviathans. Humans who had chosen restraint when they could have ruled. And they had asked for nothing in return. No planets. No tribute. Just silence. They gave the galaxy peace, and were paid back with erasure. Until now. Now their return had reminded everyone why the galaxy had once feared Earth's silence more than its roar, and as fragments of Terran communication, logs were recovered from deep black archives, one repeated again and again. If we must come back, it will not be with words. The survivors of the Ravager attacks didn't ask questions. They simply rebuilt. Worlds once scorched by invasion were now green again, restored not by their own hand but by Terran technology left behind like breadcrumbs, not as gifts, not as charity, as a message. You're on borrowed time. Don't waste it. Assembly leaders met behind closed doors. Many demanded transparency, new protocols, new defense strategies in case Earth returned. But those who had witnessed the Terran warship firsthand offered only one piece of advice. Don't prepare to fight them. Prepare to listen. Humanity hadn't demanded obedience. They hadn't sought recognition. They had made no demands at all, because they didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough. And in that still, watchful aftermath, the galaxy began to wonder. How many more Terran ships were out there? How many were waiting, buried in ice, in rock, in the folds of space, watching from the shadows? No one knew. And maybe that was the point. Because remembering Earth wasn't about fear, it was about respect. Kind you reserve for the one species who never needed your approval, but still saved you anyway. The Assembly met again, this time not in crisis but in reflection. The Ravagers were gone, scattered, silenced, erased. But their defeat had raised questions no one dared to voice during the chaos. Now, in the eerie calm that followed, those questions demanded answers. What had humanity become? Where had they been all this time? And more importantly, were they finished? The Terran warship had vanished into the dark. No trace. No warp signature. No signal. Every deep-range scan turned up nothing. It was as if the ship had folded itself back into myth. But the impact it left behind, that stayed. The galaxy bent, not from force, but from understanding. Cultures shifted. Worldviews changed. Everything that was once considered advanced now looked childish. A single Terran vessel had done what hundreds of fleets could not: restore order, not by conquering. Not by diplomacy, by showing up. And that presence, calm, deliberate, overwhelming, was more powerful than any weapon. The effect was felt everywhere. Military academies restructured their curricula to include ancient Terran tactics. Some of the younger species began learning Earth Standard as a second language just in case. Religions that once scoffed at human legend now spoke of the silent flame that watches over the stars. Statues were raised, not of heroes, but of a silhouette. A ship, a symbol, No name, no face. Just the understanding. This is the shape of correction. Even pirates, smugglers, and black market traders began whispering new rules. Never raid near Sol, never spoof an Earth signal. And if a Terran transponder ever pings your system, run. It wasn't fear that reshaped the galaxy. It was memory. Because for the first time in generations, the stars remembered what happened when you pushed too far, when you took too much, when you forgot the debt the galaxy owed to one blue planet in a quiet spiral arm. And Earth had not asked to be remembered. It had simply reminded. One assembly historian put it best during a broadcast viewed across 10,000 systems. Earth has no need to raise its voice. It has already written the final line in every language. And now, we write beneath it. Not in defiance, but in recognition. Even the most powerful civilizations reconsidered their defense. Budgets. Not to guard against invaders, but to ensure they would never be corrected again. The shift was silent. No new treaties were signed. No great declarations made. But every leader now governed under the same unspoken law. Do not provoke the species that doesn't need a fleet to win a war. And across the galaxy, children were told a new kind of bedtime story. Not one of monsters, but of the Watchers, of the ones who waited, of a single warship that came when it was needed most, and left behind a galaxy forever changed. The stars are quiet now. Trade routes flow again. Stations are rebuilt. Worlds once scarred by war bloom with life. But beneath the surface of this renewed peace, something deeper has taken root. Memory. Not of battles or victories. Not of flags or conquests, but of a shape, a single ship. Cold, dark, silent. Carved into the minds of every species across the galaxy. It came without warning. Spoke few words, fired fewer shots, and yet it changed everything. They don't know what to call it. Some name it the last arc. Others whisper the silent flame or the ghost of Sol. But all who speak of it speak with the same reverence. Because it wasn't just a vessel. It was proof that humanity had never truly left, that they had not gone extinct, only quiet, not lost, just watching. The galaxy learned that silence is not surrender, that restraint is not weakness, and that sometimes the strongest force is the one that waits, until the exact moment it's needed most. The legacy of that moment has reshaped culture, science, politics, even faith. Some now believe humanity was never part of the galaxy, but something beyond it. Others say they were always here, scattered in the dark, waiting to return when balance tipped too far. But whatever the theory, one truth remains. Earth responded, and in doing so, it reminded the stars what it means to be held accountable. No throne was claimed. No empire rose. No name demanded to be spoken. Instead, the ship left quietly just as it had arrived, leaving only ripples in space and in history. Now, deep in the archives of every major world, one phrase is etched in permanent code. Respect Earth. They only come once. The younger generations grow up with this new reality, not afraid, but aware that somewhere out there, beyond the mapped regions and commercial lanes, humanity still waits, still watches, and if the stars once again lose their way, the shape will return. Not to speak, not to negotiate, but to correct. Because that is Earth's legacy now. Not written in blood, but in silence. Not ruled by fear, but by remembrance. And the galaxy will never forget again.